How you doing, folks? Well, I'm going to try and unwrap a little bit of the mystery that surrounds SU HIF4 carburetors, because I am going to start in on restoring the pair of SU carbs I have on my 1974 MGB. Now, this car would have originally had the HIF4 carbs, but it was the first year to have these ones. The HIF4 carbs basically have to float in the bottom of them rather than at the side. The HS4 carbs have to float at the side. Aside from that, the choke size is the same, and the functionality is broadly similar. The choke works completely differently as well, and the jet is different, but we'll get into that now. So let's have a look and see what we have. So I'll start by saying that first of all, if cleanliness is not something that's important to you when doing a job like this, then don't bother doing it at all, because first of all, what you need to do is you need to make sure everything is clean. You're not going to be able to inspect it properly, it's not going to work properly, and you're at nothing essentially. This carb has just basically been externally cleaned. What I did was actually left it soaking in some water-based cleaning solution overnight to get all the heavy gack and dirt off it. And basically it makes it an awful lot cleaner, or easier to clean, because I didn't do it with this one. This is the one I actually have overhauled, and nice and shiny and clean and ready to refit to the car. It's all new seals and everything in it, new shaft, new butterfly, and that all comes in the kit. So without further ado, let's set about disassembling this one. Obviously you're going to need some basic hand tools. You're also going to need a carb rebuild kit, which is this one, and services 2 carburetors because it's for an MGB, which has 2 carbs. If your car only has 1 carb, it actually makes it more difficult, because what I would strongly recommend is only do 1 carb at a time, because then you can copy off the other one. So within the carb rebuild kit comes a book of instructions. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to follow this step by step. Okay, after removing from the engine, thoroughly clean the outside of the carburetors. I've already done that, okay? That's what I was saying to you. Clean the outside of the carbs before you go any further, okay? Now, standard suction chambers, remove the piston damper and its washer if fitted. Piston damper is here, that's this lad here. Just unscrews, pull that out, and have a little tray to put all your bits in. So remove the piston damper and its washer if fitted. There's no washer on this one. There can be a fibre washer on the top plastic bit there. It's none fitted on this one. Unscrew the suction chamber retaining screws 3 and remove the identity tag. So there's 3 retaining screws that hold the suction chamber in place. So we're going to remove them. Expect that things will be tight, especially on a car like this. The thing about it is that it's vitally important to have a good set of screwdrivers. That's the identity tag that we're talking about. Now, lift the chamber assembly vertically from the body without tilting it. So literally just pulls up without tilting it, and you'll see the actual piston has come out along with it, and poured gack all over my bench, but that's why you have a cloth handy. Okay, the next step. Separate the suction chamber, the spring and the piston assembly, and empty the oil from the piston rod. I doubt very much there's any oil in this. What actually poured out was water. So you just basically pull this out, like so. You can see there's a spring inside there. So put that aside, take the spring out, put that aside. You do not want to use abrasives inside here. Basically we're going to be just giving that a light clean with a bit of carb cleaning spray, and that's about the extent of it. You don't go too mad on it, okay? So just give it a little wipe just to get any cleaning solution out of it that was there from when I left it soaking. So we'll put that aside now. The other important thing to remember is the reason you do these carbs separately from each other is these parts are not interchangeable. This piston is mated with that cylinder, so you don't swap them. Okay, so unscrew the needle guide locking screw, withdraw the needle guide and spring. So you'll see there's a screw here, so we're going to remove that screw. So screwdriver to hand again, and take the screw out all the way. Pop it in the box, and be careful when you take the needle out, there's a spring on it and there's a guide as well, so Just the little black bit there is the guide, and there's the spring obviously as well. So that's the needle that manages the meters the fueling. And there's your piston. So put that aside as well. Next step, we need to remove the bottom cover plate. Now it says to mark the position of that relative to the body. You can't really go too far wrong if you have a half a brain in your head, but I'll do it anyway just for the pig iron because it says to do it. In order to mark it, use a scriber. You'll see there's a little dimple there on the housing, so we'll mark it there and there. Okay, so we know that's going to go back the way it came off. Okay, now 4 screws need to be removed. Now if this car has been running any time recently, there's a possibility of petrol being in here, so just be careful of that. In this instance there won't be, there's probably going to be water in it though from, well, not water, cleaning solution. So keep the washers because the new washers don't come in the kit. The spring washers I would have liked if they did come in the kit, to tell you the truth, but they don't. Okay, so that's that. Now we can take our cover plate off. So pops off like that, and we'll remove our O-ring using a pick. And take the O-ring off. Okay, you can see how geeky that is. So throw the O-ring out. I'm not going to be reusing that obviously. And we put our cover plate aside. So next thing, remove the jet adjusting screw complete with O-ring. So the jet adjusting screw is this lad here, okay? So need a smaller screwdriver. That's what you'll do. So take the jet adjusting screw out all the way. Now it'll probably stop before it comes out all the way. You probably need to just use your long nose pliers just to take it out the rest of the way. So screw this out. Okay, you can see what I mean, it stopped there now. So we just get a long nose pliers. Just grab it and pull it out the rest of the way, and we'll take the O-ring off that as well. Fiddly little O-ring this one, but I'll get it off nonetheless. Okay, so there's our jet adjusting screw with the O-ring removed. Remove the jet adjusting lever retaining screw and spring. Withdraw the jet complete with adjusting lever and disengage the lever. Okay, so there's a screw here that needs to come out next. So, screwdriver. Take that out. I'm going to keep the spring because the new spring doesn't come in the kit. So pop that in there, and then we're going to pull our jet out along with the bimetal retainer, which is a nice little yoke because it actually compensates for the temperature of the fuel by richening the mixture. So it does literally, you can see the jet is kind of just hooked in there. So we're just going to unhook it and take that out, and you do get a new jet in the kit. So we're going to put the parts that we're going to be getting rid of, just put them in there, so keep them. You'll notice on a set of twin carbs, there's one of those jets is white, the plastic is white, and one of them is black. So this is obviously the white one, so this is the rear carb. Okay, so remove the float pivot spindle and fibre washer and withdraw the float. Okay, so there is a screw in here, so just there. Remove that screw, and that will allow us to take out our float. Okay, that's that. Take the washer off it. Okay, put the washer aside. I can't remember if we get any one of them in the kit. I think we do. So there's the float pivot spindle, and we can take our float out now. So that's the float. Now there's a bit of water or cleaning stuff in the bottom of that, so we'll just throw that out. Okay, remove the needle valve and unscrew the valve seat, complete with the filter types HIF and HIF 38 and 44 only. This one doesn't have the filter in it, so there would be a filter down in there. But anyway, we're going to take out the needle valve next, so we need a suitable size socket. So take our get our little socket set up here. I just realised there's no needle valve in this car. Do you know what happened? It fell out when I emptied the water out of it. Or the cleaning solution. I keep calling it water. It's not water. It's cleaning solution. It's water-based cleaning solution. Yeah, it fell out when I emptied it out. Anyway, we have a new one of them, so it doesn't matter. So we'll just put that aside. And now we need to take out the jet bearing retainer. So unscrew the jet bearing locking nut and withdraw the bearing complete with its washer. So we need a 5/8 socket for this. Okay. So there's the locking nut for the jet bearing. So we keep that and keep the jet bearing itself as well. So that just pulls out, and you'll see on this side there is a little silver washer. We'll get a new one of them in the kit. So we will put that aside. It's a bit fiddly. It's kind of stuck in a groove on the jet bearing, so it needs to come up straight. Just be aware. Don't try not to pry on it because you could end up damaging the jet bearing. Granted, it's the inner channel is the kind of more functional surface of it, but still. I was very gentle about prying that off, but anyway, I got it off, and there's no damage done, so that's fine. So that's our jet bearing, and pop that there, and that's our washer, which is we'll just discard that because we're certainly not going to be reusing it. Now it's already starting to look pretty well disassembled. So on this side, then let's have a look. Let's see. It says here, note the location of the ends of the fast idle cam lever return spring. Okay, so the fast idle cam lever is this one here. Okay, that's basically your choke. The way the choke works in these is it doesn't have a separate butterfly inside the carb. What it does is that cam lifts up the throttle, which increases your idle speed, and in turn inside there's a brass fitting which increases fueling. There's a fuel bypass channel inside the carburetor which allows extra fuel in when it's open to a certain point. So that will increase your fueling in turn. So what we will do is, given the fact that we actually have another carb to copy off, we don't need to really take pictures or anything like that because we can actually just cog off it. But if you were doing a single carb, I strongly recommend taking as many pictures as you can of this so that you know exactly how it goes back together. The first thing we need to do in order to take this apart is we need to bend down the locking tab, the locking tabs. Now I've already had this off because I needed to see how the spring was actually installed, so it's actually only finger tight, but otherwise you need to bend down the two prongs on the locking tab and then unscrew this. So take that off, and mind you don't lose the spring. So the spring comes off next, and we'll put them aside. And they're all bits for cleaning. And you'll see there's a little seal retainer here, so that seal retainer can come off next. So that's your seal retainer there, and then your seal is underneath, obviously. So we will just wang that off. It's very crusty altogether, but there again, that's the reason why I'm rebuilding this carburetor. Like, look at this. That's supposed to be pliable, and it's just after breaking into bits. So, no use to man nor beast. Now you'll see there are two screws. Okay, so those two screws need to be removed next. We'll take off our throttle lever spring. So you'll see how that's installed there. It's just hooked on here. So just undo that, and then just pull it up off the. So that's our throttle lever return spring. So we'll put that aside as well because we're obviously going to be doing a job on that too. Now we can remove our two screws that are holding this retainer plate in place for the choke mechanism. Screw one and screw two. Retaining plate next. This is the retaining plate. And then we take off this. So there is the choke mechanism. You can see there's a hole there on the side of this bit which is stationary, and inside there's another hole with slots on either side of it which will line up with that hole inside and allow fuel through to a different passage in the carburetor when you need the choke on, and if they're not lined up, then they don't you don't get that extra fueling through, and then that's just it on its normal circuit. So we're going to just remove that just pulls out. There's not supposed to be any O-rings on that, by the way, in case you think that they're O-ring grooves. They're actually not, but we'll put that aside and we'll take the O-ring off this. There is supposed to be a fibre washer on this, but that's actually not there either. Oh no, it's stuck to the there's a fibre washer there. It's actually stuck to the body of the carb, so that's removed as well. Okay, very, very brittle O-ring. Just basically snaps off. Okay, so that's that lad. So that's going to be going for cleaning too. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to take off our throttle butterfly. Okay, now bearing in mind not every kit has the new butterfly and shaft. It's the overhaul kit has this. So if you don't have it, don't take this out. Just leave it be. First things first, what we need to do is we need to actually, there's two screws inside there which will need to be straightened out. They're actually split screws, and by splitting the screw you stop it from coming out. So what we need to do is we need to take off the throttle lever first, so we can actually turn it around far enough to get that off. And you'll see that there's two locking tab prongs in place there. So what I find useful for actually bending those locking tab prongs back is a Stanley blade, because it's sharp enough to kind of get in behind it. So where is my Stanley blade? Okay. So just literally sticking the Stanley blade in behind the prongs, just to bend them out far enough. Just don't put too much pressure on the Stanley blade, or you're likely to break it. They're brittle. Okay, so it's out far enough now that you could use like a screwdriver or something to bend them out the rest of the way. Okay, so that's off now. Next thing we need to do is remove that large nut. So we will get a suitable socket, which is this one here, which is a 1532. Oddball sizes on this, but there you go. They shouldn't be stitched. It shouldn't be so tight that you have to swing out of it, but if it is, it is. Okay, so we take the nut off. Put that aside. There's your locking tab washer. I'll show you that now. See, there's the two prongs I was talking about. We'll put that aside. We get new ones in the kit. Then there's a spacer, which is that there. And then you have this here, which is the throttle actuating lever, which is actually how the throttle is actuated by the carb linkage. Different carburetors may have different setups, but basically it all has the same end result. And then I'm just kind of give this a little wiggle. It may need a little bit of gentle prying underneath. As I said, don't go too mad on the the prying of stuff. Just be gentle, and then that comes off. Okay, so that's now removed. That's your throttle adjusting lever. So now you'll see that the carb butterfly can turn around 180 degrees, and what we need to do is we need to straighten out those two screws and remove them from the other side. So we will get a little long nose pliers and straighten them. Squeeze the ends together so they're no longer bent over. I'll give you a fair warning. On the other carburetor I had to drill out one of these, okay, because it was stitched in and did not want to come free. In the end, that one there, the little tangs broke off the end, but you only get one shot with a flathead screwdriver and removing them, okay, so make it count. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just pop this back on again, just loosely for a bit, just so that I can hold it in position while I try wang those screws out. Okay, so make sure you're well down into the screw. I can tell already that's just going to... There's one out. Okay, so that's one screw out. Oh, one thing it says to do actually in the manual is to mark the position of the throttle butterfly. I didn't see the point of this personally because of the fact that, like, you'll easily see the marks of where it used to be. But what we'll do is we just use a scriber just on the inside of it, on the inside there. Just make a small scribe line, and then that'll give us an indication as to how to line it up. It's pretty self-explanatory though, to be honest with you. I don't think it's overkill, but there you go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this here. I'm going to just get another handle of a screwdriver, tap that down into it, and away she comes. Okay, so fortunately enough I didn't have to go and do any drilling on this one. Okay, so that screw now comes out. There we go. So now we can pull our throttle butterfly out of the slot in the throttle shaft. There we go. So that's the throttle butterfly. The new throttle butterfly I got actually has the there's like a little butterfly valve in it, or sorry, a little spring poppet valve in it, which is I think it's to stop it from it's something to do with emissions. I don't even know, to tell you the truth. Anyway, we'll fit it, so, because we actually have it in the kit. So now we can push our shaft out. So we push it out in the normal, or the direction here. Take off that's one of our crusty seals again. That's in very bad order. You can push this out this way just to get that seal off, and at least we're not pulling right the way through. So, and that's our throttle shaft. Now we have a new one of them as well, so put that aside. Now what you can do is you can check with the new shaft for play in the bushings in here, and the overhaul kit comes with new bushings. Now what we'll do is we'll get our throttle shaft and we'll give it a little wiggle in the bushes and basically make sure that we're not dealing with any excess play. But essentially that's the carburetor stripped. So now is the next step is to clean everything up. Okay, so what I'm using in this is gunk. I know they say you're supposed to use water-based parts cleaners in the, or water-based solutions in these parts cleaners, but to be honest with you, I couldn't find a decent water-based product that was any use. So it seems to be alright with it. Okay, it's fairly clean there now, so we'll just give the passages a quick blow out. Yeah, the compressor's not the quietest thing in the world. go. Right, so that's the housing all cleaned up and blown out and everything, so we're pretty good there. Now we have to clean everything else. Okay, so there's all the small bits all nicely cleaned up and ready to go back on. There is our dash pot, and there is our carb body, the spring that goes down the middle of the dash pot, and there is our cover plate. Right, so that's basically all the cleaned up parts. Now let's have a look and see what comes in our kit. Alright, so here's the contents of the kit. So we'll put these out on the bench. They're the new bushings. That if you were to go down the route of replacing the throttle shaft bushings, you would need those, but we're not going to be doing that, and I'll show you why now in a minute. So we'll put them aside. This new jet. O-ring for the bottom of the float chamber. New throttle disc, and remember I was telling you about that little poppet valve that's there? That's on that. Throttle shaft. That's the fibre washer that goes underneath the choke mechanism. Those large seals, I'm not entirely sure what they're for because we've three small seals. So we'll put them aside. I'm not entirely sure if we're actually going to need them or not, but anyway, there's a new needle valve and seat. So as I said, we've three of those seals. They're the ones that I was saying were gone so brittle that they actually just broke apart. So two of them are for the throttle shaft and one is for the choke. There's new O-ring for the throttle, or the jet adjustment screw. New O-ring for the choke. There's another one of those bushings. We do have four of them because there's enough parts here to do 2 carbs. So we're not going to be using them. Then we have a set of gaskets which we won't need right now. They're for installing the carbs onto the car. We're a long way away from actually having to do that. That is the fibre gasket that goes underneath the damper rod that goes down inside the dash pot. So there's, as I said, we've 4 of those larger seals. We'll put them aside. All may become clear as to what they actually do at some point or another. New tab washers. So there's 2 of them. A new O-ring or seal to go on the bottom of the jet bearing. That's the seal that goes on the bottom, or on the float pivot. And then we have the new split screws for the throttle butterfly. So that's basically the makings of the kit. Now let's have a look and see why we don't need to go replacing the bushings. Here's the new throttle shaft, and if we pass that in there, you'll see there is only the slightest bit of wear in there, and to be honest with you, it's absolutely fine with me. By the time you take in the rubber seals and everything, that's good enough. So we're not going to go replace them. If they were very sloppy, you may need to go down the route of getting them replaced, and they have to be the ports have to be machined out. So it's not a job you can do at home, really. So to be honest with you, I wouldn't even bother anyway, unless they were very bad, which are not. So anyway, let's have a look at our book of instructions and see what needs to be done next. So as I said, we have this all blown out. All of the channels and everything have been blown out on all the parts, so we don't need to do anything there. So now let's see. Inspection basically says examine the throttle spindle and its bearings in the carburetor body. Check for any parts as necessary. So I did that already just there. I just showed you how to do it. Examine the float, needle, seating and filter where fitted for damage. We have new ones. Examine all rubber seals and O-rings. There's no point in examining them or changing them. Check condition of all fibre washers and gaskets. When new as necessary, they'll all be getting changed. Why bother buying a kit and then not using all the parts? Just use all the parts to come in the kit. Examine the carburetor body for cracks and damage and for security of the brass connections and piston key. Now the piston key is that lad there, so it's fine, it's present, it's serviceable. Clean the inside of the suction chamber and the piston rod guide with fuel or methylated spirit, denatured alcohol and wipe dry. Abrasives must not be used. I did tell you that earlier on, and we didn't use abrasives. You can see I actually just used I used some of the gunk inside there. It's clean enough. It doesn't need to be immaculate. It needs to work rather than be spotlessly clean. And if you go and scrub at it with a piece of emery paper, it's not going to work properly anymore. So examine the suction chamber and piston for damage and signs. Scoring, it's fine. I checked that already. Ball bearing suction chambers. That's not a ball bearing suction chamber. I've never seen one, so I don't entirely know what they look like. The following timing check applies only to standard suction chamber. Okay, we won't worry about that too much. Reassembly. Reassemble is the reverse of removal, only you swear in different places. So, yeah, basically. The other thing as well too, and it's a universal truth when it comes to working on vehicles or working in a workshop at all, to tell you the truth. If you drop something on the floor, it doesn't matter what colour it was when it leaves your hand. When it hits the floor, it automatically turns the colour of the floor. Which is always great fun when you drop one of the screws that holds the float chamber cover off the bottom of the carb, and it ends up just becoming part of the detritus that's all over the floor of this workshop. So I was going around on my hands and knees for about 10 minutes looking for that bloody screw. I found it anyway, and all is good. And I also found something else I lost previously, so everyone's a winner. But yeah, I think people who do this kind of tinkering will know exactly what I'm talking about. But let's get stuck into reassembling this carb. Okay, so if you remember that reassembly is the reverse of removal, you'll remember that the last thing we took out was our throttle shaft, so that's going to be the first thing we put back in. Now, what side does that go on? It goes on the side with the throttle stops built into the casting. So, seems obvious, but may as well remind you. So you just ease that in. See, that feels lovely in there. It doesn't feel like there's any particular wear. And we have a new throttle disc. And you'll see the throttle disc is chamfered on either side. It's kind of an opposing chamfer, if you know what I mean. So we need to get it so that it is going to be with the poppet on the outside, so facing up in this instance. And just pop it in there. So that'll go at the top, and this is the top here, by the way. So pop that down in there. It's going to need a bit of wiggling and a bit of persuasion, so just take your time. Now, the way I got this to seat before is if you just flick it a few times like that, it'll kind of find its own position. Let's not overcomplicate things, folks. And you'll see, you probably can't see them in there, but the scribe lines I made line up perfectly, so we're good to go. So what I will do now is I will get the two little split screws and we pop them in. So we're going to do them up tight enough that they're not going to come loose, and then we're going to split them once we're happy enough with everything. Alright, so there we go. So there's our throttle butterfly in position, which is seating perfectly. And now what we can do is we can flip this over, and we're going to split our little split screws. So we just bend one of the legs over slightly. You don't need to just go you don't need to go too far on them. Once you've bent them even slightly, they're not going to go anywhere. So again, the Stanley blade seems like the obvious choice in this. So I've literally just, there you go. So you can see that there. So that job is done now. So next thing we are going to do is we can start, or we can put the seals into the housing here for the throttle shaft. Alright, so these are the seals, and they go the wide end in first, but what I would suggest you do is just put a little bit of lubricant on. What I'm using here is aviation moly coat. I don't expect that you'll be using that, but what you can use is a bit of Vaseline. I don't recommend using grease. A bit of Vaseline though works fine. So pop the seal down over the shaft, and we'll push it down home now in a second. Let's get the other one on first, and we can push them both home with a suitable tool. So as I said, a little smear of this moly coat, which is, it's basically an O-ring grease. So that goes down in there. So now, just give them a gentle little push down with the screwdriver. They don't need to go all the way down home, they just need to go down far enough. Alright. So that's the two seals in. Next we can put our throttle lever assembly back on. So now, what is the throttle lever assembly? So if you remember, you have this lad here, which is all nice and cleaned up. Well, it's clean enough. We have the larger of the two nuts. We have that lad there, and we have a spacer, which is that thing there. And we're going to need a new tab washer. So here is our tab washer. So that arrangement needs to basically go on the shaft. So essentially the throttle is now closed, okay? So this bit goes on first. Okay. This piece goes on afterwards. Put our spacer on next. Tab washer next. And put it in such a place that the tabs, that you can get the tabs to bend them up, and you'll see there's already a little bend in them, so face that bend up, and then put a nut on. Okay, and get our ratchet and tighten that. And you don't need to swing out of it, folks, just tight, okay? Don't forget the tab washer is going to stop it from coming loose. Okay, so that's the arrangement there, okay? So you have... Alright, so that's our throttle linkage put back together. So now, get our pliers, bend up the lock tab, both legs of it. You don't need to put the spring on yet. You can't anyway. You have to wait until the choke is in position, because the plate for the choke acts as the retainer for the spring. So right, so that's that. Now let's get our choke installed. Okay, so there's new parts for that. So what we have for the choke is, there's the actual choke outer housing, and you have this lad here as well, and there's an O-ring that'll go on this, and there'll be a fibre washer. So we'll put the fibre washer on there in a minute as well, and the O-ring, and then you have the retaining plate. I'll move you guys back so you can see a bit better there. You can see more of what's going on. Okay, now O-ring first. Again, a little bit of lubricant on the O-ring, aids installation. So it's the O-ring. This is a Molykote. I get these things because they're expired, by the way, but just because it's expired doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work anymore. So that's that. So now just wipe that off, and we will put our fibre washer on. We'll put the fibre washer on dry. It goes there. And you'll see this little cutout on the, if you look here, you can see there's a cutout on that, okay? The cutout will line up with the top of the two screw holes. Now there's a cutout in the gasket here as well, so you need to line up the cutout of the gasket with the cutout of the part, whatever the hell it's called. Okay, now last thing then is we just put this inside in there, okay? Not that. That's the bloody part. That's the wrong part. This is the piece we're talking about. That's the piece with the slots cut in it. Okay, so that goes in there. Okay, job's a good one. Right, so now we can install this, as I said, with the cutout facing the top screw hole. and just press it in. Shouldn't need any great amount of force. And then we have our retaining plate, and the retaining plate goes with, I have to check the other carburetor, make doubly sure. Yeah, the retaining plate goes with the spring retainer parts, these bits here facing the throttle butterfly side, so it will go like this. Okay, and 2 screws, no with no washers on it. Okay, so they're fully home now, and there's our throttle, our choke assembly, the fuel bypass installed now. So next thing we need to do is we need to put another one of these little shaft seals on, so one of those little lads again. So again, a little bit of moly coat on that, or a bit of lubricant, and on she goes. So that shaft seal goes on there. What we can do is we can pull the shaft up. It needs to go over the wide part of the shaft. And then we have a little cover that goes over the that seal, so that just goes there. All right. So that's that. So that's that part installed. So now we have to start the fiddly job of putting the cam plate and spring on. Now, when I say it's fiddly, I mean it is fiddly. Okay. It's kind of hard to describe what way it lines up, but if you can imagine that spring has to wrap around that part there with the little bent end hooks in there, okay? And what we do is this piece here will then line up with the cutout on the bottom of this plate, and you need to kind of turn it to put a bit of tension on the spring. But you also need to make sure you haven't got the thing in a bunch here, so we just make sure it's correctly positioned. So now the idea is that this is a cam plate, so the cam plate has to lift up on the throttle, so it needs to be starting around there. But there's no point in putting it on like that, because what will happen is there'll be no spring tension on the spring which is supposed to return it. So you need to kind of start maybe 180 degrees out. Just turn it around until you can just start to you can kind of put it on the shaft, but just don't push it down all the way. And mind the spring, well, as you turn it around, doesn't foul the seal inside. And you can just push it down. So now it's up against the stop, but it's not fully down yet. So what I can do is I can make sure that the spring isn't inside. I don't think it's a very good design, to tell you the truth, but that's the way they do it, so that's the way we have to kind of go with it. I'm just kind of trying to push the spring out from against the shaft. It's up against that, and it needs to be down against the bottom part of the throttle, or of the choke lever. So we maybe just use a little screwdriver just to kind of get in at it. And once we're in far enough, we can push the plate down home. It's wrapped around it. See what I mean? Got wrapped around the part over this side. The little spud sticking down. So just bend this down. There we go. Okay, so now we're looking a bit better. You'll know you have it right. In fairness, it's pretty. There we go. Okay. So now, just keep a press on it. You see the way that is now. That's good to go. Okay. So now, next thing we need to do is we need to install our tab washer and our nut on that. So, tab washer first, obviously. Then the smaller of the two nuts, obviously with the hollow part facing out, because that's where the linkage goes through. As I said, I'm not sure how different single carbs are, but just make sure when you're doing this now that as you're tightening that nut down, that it's not up, the spring isn't stuck underneath it. You have to make sure the spring is in the correct position. So there we go. I think we're pretty decent at that. So we'll get our socket and button that up. The correct socket is a 7/16. Well, it just about goes on. It works. Alright. So there we go. So that's that on. And then as you can see, as you press that, it pushes up the throttle lever. Obviously when it comes to tuning the engine, you're going to need to adjust all of that. But for the moment, that's the job. That's that job done. So let's bend up our tab washer. Grand. Now we can put on our throttle return spring. Again, another little fiddly job. There's not many fiddly jobs in these, but the springs kind of are. So you'll see there's a notch in this part here, and the short part of the spring goes against the notch, but it goes on. But what you need to do is you need to give it a twist first of all, so that the long part of the spring is past. So what I'm basically doing is I'm twisting the spring, right, and I'm going to slip it over the nut. Now you can see now the way that spring is in the notch there, right, and then what we'll do is we'll bring this around so that it is in the outer groove on this side here of the choke plate, and that's it. Right, so now, so that's that, and then that's working as well. Right, so happy days. Next thing we can do is we'll have a quick look at the instruction book and see what it recommends as the next course of action. That's what we actually removed next. So notification of fast. Okay, so we need to put our jet guide in next. So flip the carb over. So that's this lad here, right? Now you remember there is a gasket to go on that. So that is actually it's a little metal gasket here, and it just goes down over that. And you just give it a little bit of persuasion, just kind of walk it on. It doesn't go on very easily, but it goes on all the same. What you could do is you could use a little socket and just tap it down home. I think that's what I'll end up doing. You want to try and get it down square. Alright, job's a good one. Right, that's on. So now what we'll do is we'll drop this down into the port inside there. That goes down there. That's in. And we get our locking nut, which is this lad here. And then that threads down inside there. We'll tighten that up. Give that, we pull that up nicely to make sure that it looks to me like that's off center, so I'm going to just take it out and have a look. I suppose it can't really be, can it? Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah, it's fair enough. So now, next part is the new jet that comes with the kit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get our jet and our the little bimetallic retainer, and we need to hook this. So it goes basically like, you see the way there's a little tab on it? It goes, you hook it in up through there, and then it should look like that when you have it installed. Okay, so that slides down inside the bearing piece that you just installed. And then we'll get our, oh, it's after coming off, so obviously you have to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now we have a screw with, it's a shouldered screw with a spring that goes over it. It's going to go down in there. Just try and kind of hold the whole assembly level as you put it in. So that's in now. We've got a larger screwdriver and we'll just tighten that down home. Now, obviously, it's there's a spring there because it actually has to be able to it has to be adjustable, because if you remember, the jet adjusting screw goes in through here and it actually pushes that up and down. So you're essentially adjusting the mixture by adjusting the height of the jet in relation to the needle that goes down into it, because the needle adjusts the metering of the fuel, but its starting point is essentially the higher up the needle it is, the lower the fueling is when you're starting out. But the profile of the needle then takes over from that point on. So that's in anyway, and now we're going to put our jet adjusting screw in, and we have a new O-ring for that as well. So we'll put a smear of adhesive on that, or not adhesive, lubricant, kind of completely the opposite. So new O-ring down, put the O-ring down onto the screw and start threading that screw in. So our smaller screwdriver. Okay, she's on the threads now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set the jet as an initial position. We're going to set it so that it's level with, if you look inside in the port, you'll see the jet comes up in the center of that. And we're going to set it so it's level with the shoulder that goes across there, and that'll be our starting point for tuning. So in order to, so that's decreasing the fueling by screwing it out. Okay, now you'll see the jet down the middle is now level with the land that's on either side of it, and that can be our starting position. So next thing we can do is we can put our needle and seat in. Some would argue it is probably easier to put the needle and seat in before you put the jet in, but to be honest with you, it doesn't really make a difference. So take our needle and seat out of there, separate to the packet. I'm not entirely sure why it comes in a separate packet. Screw the seat down into there. Okay, I can see it probably is a little bit easier, alright. Ah, look. The end result will be the same, so we're just gonna use an 11/32 socket to just screw that down and just give it a nip, and that's it. Now next thing to do is to put our needle in. Okay, so needle is now in, alright, and now we have dough. Okay, for those playing along at home, I did make a mistake there. I did have to take the jet out. Now it doesn't really matter because you know, you can leave the jet adjusting screw in place. It's all right, but you can't get the float in under the jet. So we will put the float in first. So float goes in, and what we'll do is we get the float pivot screw, which gets a little gasket underneath it, and put the gasket, or the little seal in place, and put a jet adjusting screw in. Now, what we need to do is we need to put a straight edge between here and here, and there needs to be a millimeter gap between the lowest point, or the center of the curve on this plate here. Now we're going to use as a straight edge. I'm going to use this ruler. Okay. Now you can see straight away that I'm having to push the float down in order to get the straight edge across. Okay. So in order to remedy that, what we're going to do is we're going to bend up the little metal tab that holds the float in place, ever so slightly, or not that holds the float in place, that acts on the needle. Now gone too far. So we need a 1 millimeter gap, 1 to 1.5 millimeter gap there. Okay. And you just gently nearly there, tiny bit in it. I am eyeballing it, in fairness. It's not, I think it's good enough to tell you the truth. Okay, that looks pretty much spot on to me now. So that's the height of our float set. All right, just make sure that that screw in there is tight. That's her. Okay, so now we can put our jet back in, and the screw that holds it in place with the spring. So the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that. Will have noticed that already before I had to go back on myself. I was going to try and edit it out, but I decided, you know what, no, I won't. That's not my style. Learn from my mistakes. It's only a small one, but alright, and I can see that the jet is at the same height as it was before, so we're good to go there. So right, so that's the whole float chamber assembled with the new jet. Next thing we can do is we can put our cover plate back on. Now you can see it says to mark out the cover plate position relative to the way it was before, but you can't really get it wrong. It won't go on wrong. Like, see that little quadrant there? That lines up with the jet. It's the low point for where the jet sucks from. So if you just line that up with that. Now obviously I'm going to put an O-ring on, but you can see my mark is exactly where I made it. So, you know, I don't know how you would actually go wrong on that, to tell you the truth. So anyway, I'm sure some of you are saying, well, I don't know how you went wrong with putting the jet in before the float, but there you go. Somebody is doing these day in, day out as part of their livelihood. It's a different story, but I don't. So okay, so there's a bit of lubricant on the new seal for the float chamber cover. So that goes on there, nice fresh seal, and then this goes down over here. So now 4 screws with their spring washers, and we tighten that all up. We just put all the screws in loosely first of all, then I'll tighten them up afterwards. Alright, we're nearly there, folks. So all we need to do now is get the top side reassembled, and yeah, we're pretty much done. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to reinstall the needle into the piston here. So what we'll do is, that's all been blown out in there, the needle has been cleaned up. So you'll see that there's a little groove there on the needle retainer. So that actually just goes in there, and what happens is, when you're tightening it up, this little needle retainer needs to stay level with the housing that surrounds it, and then we get our little screw in that holds it in place. So that's this little screw with the roundy end on it, and I'll just thread that in. You'll know you have it in the right place because it'll go flush, yeah, it'll go flush with the side of the thing. If you don't have it in the right place, it won't go in all the way. So you can see that's that needle retainer, or the little support piece is level there, and I can tighten up my screw. So that's it. You can see the needle is actually spring loaded. That's why there's the spring on the other side, obviously. So now, right, so that's that. So the next thing to do is to get the carb housing. Just want to have a look here at something. I just thought I'd check the book of instructions before going any further. So now what we can do is we can install our piston in here now. You'll see obviously needle has to go down inside the jet, so just take your time and just thread it down in there, and that goes down in there. So now next thing to put on is our large spring, which is this one here. It goes down on that, and we can put our dash pot on. The holes are offset, so it can only go on one way. So let's have a look and see what way that happens to be. I believe it's this way. Oh, screw stuck in that. So there we go. Just put that down. Nope, so obviously one hole is not lining up, so we just... There we go. Alright, so that's that on. So next thing we can do is put our 3 screws that retain it into place. One of them having the ID tag on. Don't lose the ID tag, leave it on it. Okay, so now just check to make sure the piston is operating freely. That is sublime. And finally, put this in. So now what we can do is we just put a little bit of oil in there first of all. So what's in there is engine oil. Different people recommend different things, but just until it starts to come out at the top of the inner tube, and we may as well put our little fibre seal on. So that goes there. There was none installed on this particular engine, but we got them in the kit, so we may as well use them. Alright, so there we go. So you can see there's a resistance to movement going up, but it drops down lovely. So that is 100%. So there we have it, folks. 2 freshly overhauled carburetors ready to refit to the car. So if you have any questions, comments, observations or anything like that, please do comment down below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I shall see you in a future video. Thanks very much for watching.